Hello class. First thing I'm going to ask you to do is make sure that you are on page 59 where it says day 7, understanding multiplication of integers, and pause if you need to. The lesson objective: I can multiply and divide integers. The reason I'm throwing dividing in here is because really the rules for multiplication are the same for division. And plus most of the time you're going to be using a calculator. But I do want to take in this first couple of examples and just explain what happens when you're multiplying numbers that have different signs. Okay? So you're used to always taking a positive number like 3, multiply it times another positive number like 4, and 3 times 4 is equal to 12. And you get all positives when you multiply. All right, so now we have to consider what happens when you're multiplying with different signs. So example number 1 is the product. Product is the answer to a multiplication problem of a positive integer and a negative integer. So we're going to have a positive number times a negative number. And we're going to use the integer card game to represent this. So suppose we were to draw 3 -4 cards. Okay? To find the value of the 3 -4 cards, you take your calculator and press the negative button. -4 minus 4 minus 4. Okay? Which will give you -12. All right? If you don't believe me, here we go. Ready? -4 minus 4 minus 4. -12. And yes, you do have to start with a negative to begin with. All right. So now what we're going to do is there's a relationship between multiplication and combining. So we're going to write an equation that relates how it affects the value of your hand. Drawing 3 cards would be, we have 3 -4 cards. So if we have 3 -4 cards, the value of the hand is -12. Right? Okay. In the exercise down here, let's look at what happens when we draw other groups of negative cards. So drawing 4 negative cards. So if you draw 4 negative cards, you'd have -1, -1, -1, -1. Right? And what would happen is that you would have to punch this all in the calculator, or we can use it as, if we draw 4, we have 4 -1 cards. And if we draw 4 -1 cards, we will get -4. Okay? Drawing 6 -2 cards. Now this is why sometimes it's more appropriate to write it as multiplication, because do you want to write -2 out 6 times? Probably not. So we're going to write this as drawing 6 would be 6 -2 cards. Okay. The value of 6 -2 cards would be -12. Okay. And drawing 3 -15 cards. 3 -15s. Okay, so if I have a -15 minus 15 minus 15, okay, it will equal -45. Okay. Oops, move this up a little bit so you can see. All right, so looks like a positive, going back to up here, a positive times a negative is equal to a negative. We got a negative number here. We got negatives on all of these that we did. All right. So now let's look at another option. Okay, example 2. Taking a negative integer and a positive. A negative times a positive. All right, a negative times a positive. All right, we're going to find the value of this hand. Okay, so I've got a -5 plus a 4 plus a 4, oops, plus a 4 plus another 4. The value of the hand is equal to 7. And I just did that on a calculator. -5 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. Right, now, what we're going to do is we are going to take the 4s out. So we're going to cross these off. And all we're left with is a -5. So the value is -5. So it went from a +7 to a -5, which means it went down, which means it's a negative. All right? So this would be discarding 3. This would be modeled by -3 is discarding 3 4s. That is not the bell for you to leave class. -12. So this also gives us a negative. All right. And at the end here, I'm going to write some rules for you. All right. Okay. Moving on to example 3. This is the hardest one to understand, I think, to actually like physically understand what's going on. And that's because, actually, you know what? I'm going to skip. We're going to forget about all this here. Cross all this stuff off. Let's suppose that we drew a 8 card and we drew a -5 card. Right? We're going to talk about what happens when we multiply a negative, I'm just doing a lot of scribbling here, times a negative. Let's suppose we drew these 2 cards, an 8 and a -5. Okay, the value of the hand would be 3. Right? Take a calculator, go 8 minus 5. Of course, you probably don't need a calculator for that one. What happens if I get rid of the -5? If I don't have the -5 anymore, my hand goes to an 8. Goes up. Going up would be positive. Right? All right, scribble this out. Let's look at another one. Let's suppose we had a 10 card and a -3 card and a -3 card. Okay, give you a second to copy those in. Hit pause at any time if you need to. All right, so we've got a 10 minus 3, and we get 4. Value of the hand is 4. Probably didn't need a calculator for that one either. Let's suppose we get rid of 2 -3s, and we would write this would be represented by -2 times -3. And let's just observe what happens. The value goes from a 4 to a 10. It goes up. As a matter of fact, it went up 6. All right? So to kind of summarize everything that we have, basically in these 3 examples that we have, here are the rules that we can talk about multiplying, and it will be the same for division when we do the division. If you have a positive times a positive, it will be positive. That's never going to change. That's the math you've been doing for years. Okay? But if I take a positive times a negative, I'm always going to get a negative. If I take a negative times a positive, I will always get a negative. Okay? And if I take a negative times a negative, I will always get a positive. Okay. All right. So that would be the summary. And when you're looking at the problems on the next couple pages that you're doing, you're going to look at if they're both positive, the answer is positive. Negative, negative, positive. All right. Right? And then I'll have a little bit of a discussion in class about a little analogy that you can use for this. So this is Mr. Sims signing off.